They called them worthless assets, like it was a joke everyone was expected to laugh at. Storage units, a fenced-off lot by an old industrial park, 2 safe deposit keys taped inside an envelope, and a battered filing cabinet my father refused to throw away for 20 years. My brother Kyle actually raised his glass. "To Ethan," he said, smiling like he was doing me a favor. "May he enjoy his, junk." A few people chuckled. Not because it was funny, because Kyle was the one speaking. And that's what people did around him. I didn't argue. I didn't correct anyone. I just nodded once because I already understood the game they were playing. And I also knew something they didn't. Not because I'm smarter than them. Not because I had some secret spy operation. Because my father, for all his flaws, was a careful man. And before he got sick, he started putting his carefulness into paper. I'm Ethan, 36. The practical one, according to my aunt. The one who never had the personality for leadership, according to Kyle. I worked inside my father's company for 11 years. Operations, compliance, coordination, vendor contracts. The unglamorous stuff that keeps lights on and lawsuits away. Kyle was the face, the charm, the future CEO in everyone's head. I was the guy people remembered only when something broke. And in our family, that meant I was invisible. Right up until the moment they needed someone to blame. My father, Richard Caldwell, built Caldwell Industrial from one warehouse and a handshake deal, back when people still trusted handshakes. By the time I joined, it was a real company. Multiple properties, long-term municipal contracts, a few specialty patents we licensed out, and a balance sheet that made bankers treat my dad like a saint. Then he got sick, not suddenly, not dramatically, the slow kind. The kind where you watch a strong man become smaller in inches every month, and you start measuring time by doctor visits instead of holidays. The last year of his life changed the atmosphere of our family, more than his illness did. Kyle started helping more, showing up to meetings he'd never attended, asking for access to accounts he'd never cared about, bringing his girlfriend to events like she was already First Lady of Caldwell. My stepmother Marissa, my dad's second wife, started speaking in numbers, estate, liquidity, tax exposure. She'd say things like, "We need to protect the legacy," while looking directly at me, like I was a leak in the boat. And my dad got quiet. He stopped arguing back, stopped correcting them. He would listen, then look at me when no one else was watching, like he was checking whether I was still paying attention. 3 weeks before he died, he asked me to drive him to his attorney's office. Not a casual request. He called me at 6:12 a.m. and said, "Ethan, I need you today. Don't tell your brother." That's what made my stomach drop, not the appointment, the instruction. I picked him up, and he was dressed like it was a board meeting. Tie, jacket, even cufflinks. He climbed into my car slower than he used to, and the whole time his hand stayed tight on a thick envelope. He didn't speak much on the drive. Radio off, just the sound of tires and his breathing. When we got to the office, the receptionist knew his name before he said it. We were escorted into a back conference room, the kind with framed photos of golf courses and too much leather. His attorney, Halpern, came in with a banker's smile, polite, controlled. He asked my dad a few questions in that careful tone people use around a man they know is dying. My dad listened, then slid the envelope across the table. "I want it done the way we discussed," he said. Halpern didn't open it right away. He looked at me instead. "Your father asked that you be present," he said, "not as a party to anything today, but as a witness to his intent." Kyle wasn't there. Marissa wasn't there. No family committee. Just me, my father, and a man with a legal pad. At one point, Halpern pulled out a binder. Thick. Tabbed. The kind of binder that holds decisions you can't undo. He flipped to a section labeled Schedules. And for a second, literally a second, I saw a line with a name on it. My name. I didn't read the trust. I didn't steal anything. I didn't even fully understand what I was looking at. But I saw E. Caldwell on a typed beneficiary line, and I saw my father's hands settle over it like he was covering a flame from wind. He noticed my eyes. He didn't wink. He didn't smile. He just said quietly, "Some things are not for debate." After that, he never brought it up again. 2 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect. Polished speeches, controlled tears, business associates acting like grief was a networking event. Kyle cried the loudest, which sounded cruel to say until you knew my brother. He can turn any room into a stage. Marissa held Kyle's hand like it was a photo opportunity. I stood slightly behind them because that's where people like me stand. And then came the meeting. Not the emotional kind, the administrative kind, the let's settle the estate kind. Halpern scheduled it for a Wednesday afternoon in his office. He called it a family session, but it felt like a transaction. Kyle showed up early. Marissa arrived with a folder of her own. The company's CFO, Dana Rios, was there too, because apparently my father's death also needed oversight from finance. When I walked in, Kyle looked me up and down like I was a contractor who wandered into the wrong room. "You ready to hear how this works?" he asked, too casually. I didn't take the bait. I sat down, placed my hands on the table, and watched Halpern arrange his documents. With the slow precision of someone defusing a bomb, he cleared his throat. "I'm going to outline the assets and instructions as written," he said. "I'll answer questions at the end." Kyle leaned back, smiling. Halpern began listing major holdings, property shares, business interests, structured accounts. Kyle nodded at each one like he was checking items off a shopping list. Then Halpern paused, reached for a smaller packet, and said, "There are also non-core allocations." Marissa tilted her head. "Non-core?" Halpern looked down. "Yes. Items your husband kept separate from the primary estate holdings." Kyle snorted. Dana didn't. Halpern read them out, one by one. 3 storage units in Fairfield. A parcel lot under Caldwell Logistics. Currently inactive. 2 safe deposit keys, contents unspecified. And a filing cabinet held in the Caldwell Industrial Records Room. Kyle laughed out loud. "That's it?" he said. "That's what he left Ethan?" Dana gave a tight smile like she didn't want to laugh, but didn't want to offend Kyle either. Marissa's eyes flicked to me, then away, dismissive, like I'd been handed a broken chair. I kept my face calm. Because inside, something cold and steady had already clicked into place. Halpern didn't react to the laughter. He simply turned the page. And then his expression changed, just slightly. Like he'd reached a line that didn't match the mood in the room. He read it again silently, lips moving once. Then he looked up and said very carefully, "Before we go further, I need to confirm something about the trust file." Kyle's grin stayed on his face, but the confidence behind it shifted. "What do you mean?" Marissa asked. Halpern tapped the document. "The beneficiary schedule for the separate trust is not attached to the copy provided to your family," he said. "It should be here." He paused, eyes moving to each of us in turn. And according to my notes, it was deliberately kept separate. Kyle frowned. "Separate from what?" Halpern didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the table. Then he said the sentence that made the room go quiet in a way that wasn't respectful or sad. Quiet like something had just gone wrong. "The only person who would have the keys to complete this file," Halpern said, "is the person your father trusted to hold them." And his eyes landed on me. Halpern's eyes stayed on me long enough for Kyle to notice. That was the moment the room changed. Kyle stopped smiling like the whole thing was entertainment. Marissa stopped, performing grief. Dana Rios, the CFO, sat up straighter, the way someone does when a family matter suddenly turns into a risk. "What keys?" Kyle asked, already annoyed, like I'd hidden his wallet. I didn't answer right away, not to be dramatic, because I was choosing my words. There's a very specific trap families like mine set when money is involved. If you explain too much, they paint you as scheming. If you say nothing, they paint you as guilty. The only safe option is to be precise, calm, document-driven. Halpern slid a thin page out of the packet and rotated it toward me. Richard asks that you receive the safe deposit keys, he said, and that you deliver them only after this meeting began. Marissa's voice sharpened. That's not what he told me. Halpern didn't flinch. I'm telling you what he told me. Kyle laughed once, short, ugly. You're kidding, he said, pointing at the page like it offended him. Dad gave him the keys. For what? For storage units and a dead lot? Dana's expression didn't change, but I saw her eyes flicker to the word trust. She wasn't thinking about feelings. She was thinking about governance. I reached into my jacket and took out the envelope I'd brought. Not because I'd planned a theatrical reveal, because my father's instructions had been clear. Bring it. Don't open it here, and don't give it to anyone else. I placed the envelope on the table. 2 small keys taped inside a plastic sleeve, a safe deposit box number, and a single handwritten note on my father's stationery. Kyle leaned forward like he might grab it. Marissa's hand touched his wrist, not gently, possessive. Halpern lifted the note first and read it silently. His mouth tightened in a way that told me there was no soft version of what it said. He cleared his throat. This is not for you, Kyle snapped. Halpern looked up. It is for the file. He opened the note and read it aloud. Halpern, my father had written. If they're laughing, it means they didn't learn anything. Proceed as instructed. If Ethan is in the room, you can finalize the schedule. Kyle's face reddened, immediately like his body reacted before his brain found an excuse. Proceed as instructed, he repeated. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Halpern didn't answer Kyle. He turned to me. Do you have the box contents inventory? He asked. No, I said. Dad told me not to open it. He said it wasn't for me to see first. That was true, and it mattered, because it proved I wasn't hiding anything. I was following instructions. Dana finally spoke. Halpern, she said carefully. Are we talking about a separate trust instrument? Halpern nodded. Yes, a standalone trust file, created 2 years ago, amended 3 times. Last amendment executed 6 weeks before Richard's death. Marissa's lips parted. 2 years ago? Kyle looked at her, then back at Halpern. Why didn't we know about this? Halpern's voice stayed neutral. I don't discuss client planning decisions with anyone not authorized in writing. Marissa's face hardened into something cold and bright. That trust should be considered marital property, she said. My husband wouldn't... Dana's tone cut in like a razor. Marissa, she said, please don't say things you can't support. Not in front of counsel. Kyle snapped his head toward Dana. Whose side are you on? Dana didn't blink. The company's. That was the first micro crack in Kyle's certainty, because he was used to people picking him. Dana wasn't picking him. She was picking whatever kept her employed and out of court. Halpern placed the keys in front of him like they were evidence, not family memorabilia. These keys open a safe deposit box held under the trust, he said. The box contains the beneficiary schedule, which completes the trust file. He paused. Until we open that schedule, we cannot finalize distribution, and we cannot authorize any transfers of the non-core allocations. Kyle scoffed. So we open it, right now. Halpern's eyes moved to me again. We can, he said, but only with Ethan's consent. The authorization is tied to the trustee's instruction. I exhaled slowly. Kyle's gaze burned into me. Consent? He repeated. You're going to consent to our father's estate being settled. I met his eyes, kept my voice level. I'm going to do exactly what Dad asked, I said. And what did he ask? Marissa said, too smooth. Before I could respond, Halpern interrupted. He asked Ethan to control the timing, he said, and he asked that the schedule be read aloud in this office with everyone present. Kyle leaned back, jaw tight. So you're telling me, he said slowly, that Dad set up some kind of surprise. Halpern didn't correct him. He just reached for his phone. I'm going to call the bank, he said. They'll bring the contents to us. We'll open it here. Marissa's tone went sharper. You can't just... I can, Halpern said, and for the first time there was a faint edge in his voice. Because it's my client's file and we're closing it under his written instruction. Dana glanced at me, and in that glance I read a question she couldn't ask out loud. How bad is this going to be? I didn't know. Not exactly. But I knew what my father had been doing in the last year of his life, watching people, measuring them and writing down the consequences. 10 minutes later, a bank courier arrived. Not a dramatic entrance. Just a middle-aged man in a suit carrying a locked case and a clipboard. 2 signatures, 2 ID checks, security protocol. Real life. Boring. On purpose. Halpern unlocked the case with the keys. Inside was a folder, sealed with a tamper strip, labeled with the trust name, Caldwell, Separate Trust. Kyle's leg bounced under the table like he couldn't tolerate not being in control. Halpern broke the seal. He pulled out a single page first, printed notarized copy. No fluff, just names, percentages, and specific instructions. His eyes scanned it once, and for the first time since my father died, I saw a professional attorney hesitate. Not because he didn't understand it, but because he knew what it would do. Kyle leaned in. Read it. Halpern looked up. I will, he said, but I need everyone to understand. This is legally binding. It's not a suggestion. It's not a discussion. Marissa's voice turned sweet again. Of course. Kyle's face said the opposite. Halpern lowered his eyes to the page and began reading. Beneficiary schedule, he said. Caldwell's separate trust. He cleared his throat again, like he was preparing to say something that would change the room forever. Primary beneficiary, he read. And then he stopped, because the name wasn't Kyle's, and it wasn't Marissa's. It was mine, and the percentage next to it wasn't small. Dana's pen hit the table quietly, like her hand had gone numb. Kyle's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then he finally said it, one word like it tasted toxic. No. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself, even when I saw my name in that binder, months ago. They didn't just underestimate me. They had already decided I didn't matter. And now they were about to learn what it costs to treat someone like an afterthought. But that was just the beginning. Kyle didn't just look shocked. He looked insulted, like the document had personally disrespected him. No, he said again, louder this time, like volume could rewrite paper. That's not real. That's not what he wanted. Marissa leaned forward, eyes moving fast across the page as if she could find a typo big enough to rescue her. Dana Rios didn't move. She just stared at the numbers, because she already understood the operational impact. Halpern kept his finger on the line as he continued reading, calm and clinical. Primary beneficiary, Ethan Caldwell, 70% of trust-held assets. Kyle's chair scraped the floor. 70? He barked. That's impossible. Halpern didn't look up. He kept reading. Secondary beneficiary, Kyle Caldwell, 15%. Kyle laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. 15! 15! You're joking. Halpern's voice didn't change. Marissa Caldwell, 10%, with additional monthly support payments as outlined. In addendum. B. Marissa's breath caught, like she'd been slapped softly in public. Dana's eyes flicked to Marissa's line. Not out of sympathy, out of calculation. Halpern turned the page. And, he said, there are conditions. Kyle pointed at me. Of course there are. Halpern read, Ethan is appointed the trustee with authority to execute distributions and to control access to trust-held records, including the non-core allocations. Kyle's hands balled into fists. He made him trustee? Halpern continued. Distribution to Kyle is contingent upon signing the corporate non-interference clause and the release of claims. Kyle snapped, What the hell is a non-interference clause? Dana finally spoke, voice low, controlled. It means you can't obstruct operations. You can't pressure vendors. You can't redirect contracts. You can't use ownership as a weapon. Kyle turned on her. So you knew about this? I did not, Dana said, but I know what it means. Halperin read the next line. Violation triggers forfeiture of Kyle's share and automatic reallocation to Ethan. Kyle's face went from red to pale so fast it looked like a medical event. Marissa's voice shook, but not with sadness. You're telling me my husband put a trap in his own trust? Halpern corrected her without emotion. He put a safeguard. Kyle's hand slammed the table. He was sick. He was manipulated. He was... Careful, Dana said instantly. That's a serious allegation. Kyle ignored her and looked at Halpern like he was staring down a witness. This is insane, he said. We contest it. We challenge capacity. You can try, Halpern said, and for the first time he sounded tired. But I want to remind you, your father initiated neuropsych capacity evaluations during the amendment process. Twice, on record, with independent physicians. That landed like a blunt object. Kyle blinked. He did what? Halpern tapped the file. Your father anticipated this reaction. Marissa's lips pressed tight. She looked at me again as if trying to find weakness she could exploit. You were in on this, she said. I shook my head once. I wasn't, I said quietly. I didn't even know the percentages. Kyle stared at me like he'd found a new enemy. You're going to take 70%, he said, voice low. You, the guy who spent his life hiding in Dad's shadow. That one hit. Not because it was true, because it was how he genuinely saw me. I felt something shift in my chest, not rage, not sadness, clarity. That night, I stopped trying to be loved by people who only respected leverage. Halpern continued reading the conditions, and each line made Kyle more frantic. There were operational clauses, restrictions on removing documents from the company premises, mandatory annual audits paid for by the trust, and a requirement that any sale of trust-held property be reviewed by independent counsel. It wasn't just inheritance planning, it was an engineered containment system, designed for one type of person, Kyle. Marissa tried a different strategy. She looked at Halpern and softened her voice into something almost maternal. Richard wouldn't want his sons fighting, she said. He'd want unity. Halpern didn't react. I agree, he said, which is why he built unity into the file. The simplest path is acceptance. Kyle's gaze snapped back to me. So what, Ethan? He said. You're just going to do this? You're going to take it and pretend you earned it? I kept my voice steady. I earned something, I said. Not money, but trust. Kyle's lip curled. Trust? You think this is trust? Before I could answer, Dana put her hand up slightly, an executive gesture. I need to ask something for the company, she said. The non-core allocations, are any of those assets tied to current operational risk? Halpern hesitated. Potentially? My stomach tightened. Dana continued. We have active municipal contracts. We have compliance requirements. If any trust-held assets touch licensing, IP, or property rights used in those contracts, then this changes governance. Kyle leaned forward again, pouncing. Exactly, he said. So we can't just hand it to him? Dana didn't look at Kyle. She looked at me. Ethan, she said, what exactly are these worthless assets? I swallowed. Because this was the part I'd been avoiding, even in my own head. The storage units weren't just junk. My father had used them as overflow records. Storage for years. Old vendor binders, property deeds, legacy contract files, things the company digitized poorly or not at all. The kind of documents no one cares about until a regulator asks for them. The fenced-off lot wasn't just inactive. It was adjacent to an industrial corridor. The city had been quietly rezoning for redevelopment. My father had mentioned it once in passing years ago, like it was a chess piece he was holding until the right moment. And the safe deposit keys. Those weren't sentimental. That box had been important enough for him to build the trust around it. I looked at Halpern. What else is in the box? I asked, because I genuinely didn't know. Halpern didn't answer immediately. He opened a second packet from the case, thicker, sealed, labeled Addendum C, Holdings and Instructions. He broke the seal and began scanning. Dana's face tightened. Kyle's eyes darted between the packet and my expression. Marissa sat perfectly still. Halpern turned a page and paused. Then he said softly, like he couldn't believe he was saying it out loud, "The trust holds the beneficial ownership of the company's restricted licensing agreement." Dana's head snapped up. "What licensing agreement?" she asked, sharp now. Halpern read the exact name, and Dana went still. Because she knew. The company's biggest municipal contract, the one that kept half our warehouses full, depended on a specific environmental handling license tied to a legacy agreement written under my father's name. A license everyone assumed the company just had. But legally, it wasn't owned by the company. It was controlled by the trust. Kyle's voice cracked. "You're saying the company doesn't own its own license?" Dana's jaw clenched. "If that's true, we have an exposure problem." Halpern looked at me. "Your father's instructions are explicit," he said. "The trust controls the license. The trustee, Ethan, controls the trust." Kyle pushed back from the table, like the chair burned him. And then he did the one thing I should have expected. He smiled. Not friendly, strategic. "Okay," he said. "Fine. You win today." Marissa's eyes narrowed. Dana looked skeptical. Kyle's smile widened. "But you don't understand," he said, looking right at me. "I can make this so ugly you'll beg to give it back." And that was the moment I realized the trust wasn't a gift. It was a test. And my father had just handed me the match, because he knew my brother would pour gasoline on everything. And then silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. The silence in Halpern's office didn't last. Kyle broke it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, then stood up like the meeting was over. "Congrats," he said. "Enjoy your paperwork." Marissa followed him out first, already dialing someone on her phone. Donna stayed seated, looking at the trust pages like they were a live wire. Halpern watched them leave, then turned to me. "You heard the threat," he said. "Now we assume he means it." I nodded once. My hands were steady, but my stomach wasn't. Because Kyle didn't threaten people to vent. He threatened them to move the board, and I didn't know it yet. But while we were still in that building, he'd already started. Dana's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her face tightened. "Vendor relations," she murmured. "They're getting calls." Halpern's voice went flat. "From Kyle." Dana nodded. "From his number." I didn't panic. I didn't preach about fairness. I did the only thing that works against someone like Kyle. I moved faster than his story. "Dana," I said, "get me a list of any contracts that mention the restricted license, directly or indirectly, and pull the last 2 years of compliance correspondence. Everything." Dana didn't argue. She just stood up and said, "I'll do it." Halpern was already drafting emails. "I'm issuing a formal notice," he said. "Effective immediately, all trust-held rights remain in force under trustee control. Any interference will be documented as a breach of the non-interference clause." He looked at me. "Ethan, your job is to stay boring, calm, procedural. Let him be the one who looks reckless." That would have been easier if Kyle hadn't been my brother. By the time I got back to the office, the chaos had arrived ahead of me. 2 managers were standing near my desk, whispering. Someone from procurement looked like she'd just swallowed a battery. And when Dana walked in behind me, her assistant hurried over and said, "Kyle just told Metro Waste that the license may be under dispute, and they should pause dispatch." Dana's jaw flexed. That license wasn't a trophy. It was oxygen. Without it, half our contracts stalled, and stalled contracts turned into penalties, audits, and headlines. I walked into Dana's office and closed the door. "What's he actually doing?" I asked. Dana pulled up a call log on her screen. "He's calling vendors and warning them," she said. "He's implying the trust is invalid, so the license could be suspended. He wants them nervous. Once they're nervous, he wants them calling the city. Once the city gets nervous, He wants an emergency review. My throat tightened. Can he trigger one? Donna hesitated. If he knows who to call, he can cause noise. Noise is enough. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. Then we take away his ability to sound credible. Donna blinked once. How? I leaned forward. We produce clean documentation before anyone asks, I said. We don't wait for an audit. We invite oversight on our terms. Donna stared at me like she was deciding whether I was naive or dangerous. Then she said, That's actually smart. I opened my laptop. First, I said, we notify the city that there's no operational disruption. The trust controls the license, yes, but the trustee authorizes its continued use by Caldwell Industrial. We give them a signed letter today. Halpern had already sent me a draft in my inbox. I forwarded it to Dana and our compliance director. Second, I said, we prepare the compliance history file. If Kyle's pushing for a review, we show them a company that's already ready. Dana exhaled through her nose. We don't have everything digitized. I know, I said, and then I stood up. Where's the records room cabinet? I asked. Dana's eyes narrowed. The one your father refused to get rid of? I nodded. 10 minutes later, I was in the records room in front of that worthless filing cabinet. It smelled like dust and old paper. The label maker tape on the drawers was peeling, and inside, exactly as I suspected, were the things nobody thought mattered until your survival depended on them. Legacy permit renewals, inspection reports with handwritten notes, emails printed out and stapled to binders because my father never trusted servers, signed acknowledgments from vendors, and a thick folder marked in my father's handwriting. Restricted license, originals, addenda. My fingers went cold. I carried that folder like it was glass and walked it straight into Dana's office. She opened it, flipped 2 pages, and the tension in her shoulders shifted, just slightly. This, she whispered, is everything. I watched her face change as she realized what I realized. Kyle could make noise, but noise didn't beat paper. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered, a man's voice, crisp and official. This is compliance oversight for the city contracting office. We received a message indicating there may be an issue with your environmental handling authorization. Kyle, he'd gone straight for the trigger. I kept my voice calm. There is no disruption, I said. The authorization is held under a trust structure, and I'm the trustee. We have counsel preparing a formal letter confirming continued operational use. I can send our compliance history and renewal chain today. Silence. Then the man said, send it today. I will, I said, and if you received any additional claims, I'd like them forwarded in writing, for record accuracy. He paused. Understood? I hung up and looked at Dana. They're watching, I said, so we give them something boring to watch. Dana nodded once. I'll assemble the package. That should have been the end of Kyle's leverage. It wasn't, because Kyle didn't just want the city anxious, he wanted the company divided. An hour later, he walked into the building like he owned it, smiling, greeting people loudly, acting like he was already back in control. He headed straight for Dana's office. I was there when he came in. He didn't even pretend surprise. He looked at Donna, then at me. You're playing CEO now? He said. Donna didn't react. This is about risk mitigation. Kyle leaned closer to her desk. Risk mitigation is making sure the license doesn't end up in the hands of someone who can't handle it. I didn't rise to it. I just opened my laptop and turned it slightly. On the screen was Halpern's email, time-stamped, stating that any interference with trust-held operations constituted a breach of Kyle's distribution clause. I slid the screen toward him. Kyle, I said evenly, stop calling vendors. Kyle's smile didn't break. Or what? Or you trigger your own forfeiture, I said. It's written. You've already crossed into interference. Donna's eyes flicked to Kyle's phone in his hand. Kyle laughed. You think you can prove anything? Donna spoke before I could. We can, she said, because vendor relations forwarded recordings, And your number is in every call log. Kyle's expression changed for the first time, just a flash. He hadn't expected Dana to stand with me. That was the micro-catharsis I didn't know I needed. Not revenge, not humiliation, just the first real confirmation that I wasn't alone in the room anymore. Kyle's eyes narrowed. So that's it. You're siding with him. Dana didn't blink. I'm siding with the company. Kyle shifted, recalculating. Then he turned his attention fully on me. You want to play trustee? He said softly. Fine. He lifted his phone and tapped the screen like he was pressing a detonator. I already sent the board an email, he said, and I CC'd everyone who matters, telling them you're holding the company hostage with a private trust. He smiled again. Let's see who they believe. My stomach dropped, not because he emailed them, because I knew the board. They didn't care about truth first. They cared about stability, and Kyle was about to sell them a story that sounded stable. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a calendar invite. Emergency board call, 4:30 p.m. Dana looked at it, then at me. Kyle leaned back, satisfied. See you on the call, he said. And as he walked out, he added almost casually, Oh, and Ethan? He didn't turn around. If you embarrass me today, I'll burn every bridge you think you're standing on. Then the door closed, and I stared at the invite, realizing the next 90 minutes weren't about inheritance anymore. They were about whether I could hold the line without becoming the villain in his narrative. At 4:29, I joined the board call and muted my microphone. Not because I was scared to speak, because I wanted to hear the room first. Kyle joined a second later, unmuted, laughing softly like this was a formality. Marissa wasn't on the invite, which told me something important. Kyle was trying to make this look corporate, not family. He wanted the board to believe he was protecting the company from me. Dana joined last. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. Then the chair of the board, Martin Hale, spoke. Kyle, he said, you requested this call. Explain. Kyle didn't hesitate. Thank you, he began. This is uncomfortable, but we have a governance crisis. Ethan is using a private trust structure to control a restricted operating license. Vendors are confused. The city has questions. We're exposed. He said it smoothly. Practiced, like he'd rehearsed it while driving over. Then he added the poison line. I'm asking the board to intervene before we lose the municipal contract. Martin's tone stayed neutral. Ethan, your response. I unmuted. I'm not holding anything hostage, I said. I'm preventing disruption. The trust holds beneficial ownership of the restricted license by my father's design. I have already authorized continued operational use by Caldwell Industrial. In writing, through counsel. Kyle cut in. But you could revoke it any time. I didn't raise my voice. I could, I said, which is exactly why my father structured it with audit requirements, independent review, and non-interference provisions. Martin paused. Non-interference provisions? Halpern had warned me, stay boring. Let Kyle be the emotion. So I did. The trust file includes a clause, I said, that prohibits interference with company operations during distribution. Violation triggers forfeiture of the violator's share. Kyle's laugh was forced. That's ridiculous. Dana spoke before I could continue. It's not ridiculous, she said. It's measurable. Kyle has been contacting vendors and implying the license is disputed. We have call logs. We have recordings. We have forwarded emails from vendor relations. Silence. Not respectful silence. The kind where the room recalculates. Kyle's voice hardened. Dana, you're taking his side because he's dangling the license. Dana's tone stayed flat. No, she said. I'm taking the company's side. And your calls created the only real disruption we've seen. Martin's voice came back, slower now. Kyle, he said, did you contact vendors? Kyle tried to dance. I was clarifying, he said. They were already hearing rumors. Dana didn't let him. The rumors started with his calls, she said, and the city contracting office contacted us after receiving a message. Ethan responded with a compliance package offer the same hour. Another board member spoke, Linda Shore, legal background. Ethan, she said, are you willing to provide the board a copy of the trust provisions relating to the license and governance? Yes, I said, through counsel, today. Linda continued, and are you willing to sign a resolution stating you will not revoke operational use without board review and independent counsel oversight, except in the event of legal non-compliance? That was the opening I needed. Yes, I said, provided it matches the trust safeguards and doesn't remove trustee responsibility. I'm not here to threaten the company. I'm here to keep it compliant. Kyle exhaled loudly into his mic, like I was wasting everyone's time. Martin didn't react to Kyle. He addressed me. Why did your father do this? He asked. This was the only moment I allowed myself to be personal. Briefly. Because he knew what would happen after he died, I said. He knew people would fight, and he knew someone would try to use the company as leverage inside the family. Kyle snapped. Linda cut him off. Kyle, she said, enough. Another board member, Raj Mehta, spoke. We're missing something, he said. This trust doesn't just hold the license. It also holds non-core allocations. What are they? I didn't guess. I used the only credible thing in a room like this. Documents. The storage units contain original compliance records and legacy contract files, I said. The filing cabinet contains originals and addenda related to restricted licensing and renewals. The inactive lot is held under the trust and tied to a future redevelopment clause my father negotiated years ago. Raj's voice sharpened. Redevelopment clause? Donna answered this time because she had already reviewed the folder. It's an option agreement, she said. If the city rezones the corridor, which they are in the process of doing, the trust-held parcel becomes the required buffer and access point for the new industrial route. Without it, our logistics expansion plan is blocked. Kyle went quiet, not because he didn't understand, because he did. He'd laughed at the worthless lot because he hadn't bothered to learn what it was. Martin's voice came back, colder now. So the trust holds, he summarized, the license, the historical compliance originals, and a parcel critical to expansion. Yes, Dana said, and Kyle's interference threatened all three by creating external scrutiny. Kyle finally spoke, but the confidence was thinner. This is being spun, he said. Ethan is positioning himself as irreplaceable. He's trying to force the company to accept him. I didn't attack him. I didn't insult him. I didn't even sound satisfied. I did what my father would have done. I made it simple. Kyle, I said, you were offered 15% if you didn't interfere. He scoffed. And what? I'm supposed to just accept being cut out. I didn't flinch. You weren't cut out, I said. You were given a share with one condition. Don't sabotage the company to win a family argument. Then I paused, because timing matters more than words, and you already broke it. The board didn't react loudly, but Dana did something subtle. She shared her screen. A call log list, timestamps, vendor names, a recorded voicemail transcript where Kyle said the words, license dispute, and trust is being challenged. It wasn't drama, it was evidence. Linda spoke again. Kyle, she said, this is interference. Under the clause Ethan described, this could trigger forfeiture. Kyle's voice rose. So now you're all going to punish me because I made calls? Martin's tone turned final. We're not punishing you, he said. Your father structured conditions. You ignored them. And you created unnecessary risk. Kyle tried one last move. This is insane, he said. Ethan set me up. That's when Halpern joined the call, invited by Dana. Quietly, without announcement. His voice was calm, precise. Kyle, he said, your father anticipated this argument. There are capacity evaluations, notarizations, and video records of his intent. Contesting it will not be quick, and it will not be clean. Kyle went silent. Martin didn't sound angry. He sounded disappointed, which is worse in corporate rooms. Here's the decision, Martin said. Ethan will remain trustee. The company will continue to operate under the license with written authorization. Donna will file the compliance package today. And Kyle, effective immediately, you are instructed to cease all vendor and city contact regarding licensing or trust matters. Kyle muttered. Or what? Linda answered. Or we treat it as deliberate interference and proceed accordingly. The call ended a minute later. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, feeling something I didn't expect. Not triumph, relief. Because for the first time since my father got sick, the room had chosen reality over performance. That should have been the end. But life doesn't end cleanly just because you win a meeting. Kyle didn't stop. He couldn't. The next morning, Halpern called me. His voice was calm, almost clinical. Kyle filed a notice, he said. He's contesting the trust. I exhaled slowly. Of course he is. Halpern continued, and he asked for an emergency injunction to freeze trustee authority. My stomach tightened. Can he get it? Not with what we have, Halpern said, but we need to respond fast. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I opened the trust file again and I finally read the section my father had hidden behind boring labels, because my father didn't just give me assets. He gave me a way to end the fight without endless war. A clause titled, Final Disposition. And when I read it, I understood why he kept it separate. If Kyle contested the trust required one of two outcomes. Either Kyle withdrew the contest and signed the release, or his share would be redirected automatically into a restricted charitable foundation in my father's name. No payout, no control, no leverage. A clean ending. My father had built a door that Kyle could walk through peacefully, and a cliff that Kyle would throw himself off if he refused. That night, I met Kyle in person for the first time since the board call. Not in a courtroom, not at a family dinner, in the only place Kyle ever respected anything, a conference room. He walked in with that same practiced smile, but his eyes were raw. You think you're untouchable now, he said. I slid one sheet of paper across the table. Not the full trust, just the clause title and the consequence, highlighted. Kyle read it. His face changed, slowly, like reality sinking through a thick wall. You'd really do that? He whispered. I kept my voice low. I'm not doing anything, I said. Dad already did. I'm just the one who has to execute it. Kyle stared at the paper like it was a verdict. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he said quietly, almost to himself, He'd rather give it to strangers than to me. I didn't rub it in. I didn't lecture him about character. I didn't say, you deserve it. I said the only true thing. He'd rather it not become a weapon, I said. Kyle swallowed. His jaw flexed. His pride fought his survival. Finally, he pushed the paper back toward me and said hoarse, What do you want? I leaned forward. I want the company stable, I said. I want you to stop trying to burn it down to prove you should own it. Kyle's eyes were wet. He blinked hard, angry at himself for it. And my 15%, he asked. It's still there, I said. If you sign. If you stop. He stared at me for a long time. Then he nodded once. Not forgiveness. Not brotherhood. Surrender. 2 days later, Kyle signed the release and the non-interference clause. He got his 15%. Marissa got her support payments. And I got what my father actually left me, more than money. A structure that forced the truth to win. Months later, when people in the company talked about my father's worthless assets, they didn't laugh anymore, because they understood what those assets really were. They were the parts of the system nobody respects, until they're the only thing keeping you alive. And the trust file, the one Kyle and Marissa tried to dodge, it did exactly what my father intended. It named the beneficiary, and it wasn't them. It was me. And for the first time in my life, that didn't feel like revenge. It felt like peace.